Secret Rings is a game I feel like people don't know a lot about. I feel like people hate the motion controls so much they end up kind of glossing over the rest of the game's mechanics. Like, you might have known that the game has skills that can change up Sonic's moveset, but did you know that at a certain point you can actually just straight up disable basic movement functions? So if you don't like the charge jump, you can just get rid of it and you're basically playing Black Knight, except you have to tilt the controller to move. Ooh. But you can go even further and straight up disable the homing attack, you know? Get rid of some of that automation. It's a pretty weird thing to have in the game, and there's no reason to make use of it unless you're trying to save up skill points early on in the game. But a challenge that I'm surprised to see that no one has done, to my knowledge, is actually trying to beat the game with all of these skills disabled. So you have nothing at your disposal except for running and some pretty stiff jumping. Now technically you can't actually beat the entire game like this, you have to reach a certain level before the options are available to you, but I'll just go through every single go for the goal stage and see how it goes. Starting with Sand Oasis. I'm playing the game on Dolphin, but I'm using an actual Wii remote, so what you see here is some legit movement going on. The first part of the stage is simple enough, just getting used to tilting the remote, but it isn't until we reach this wall, our first required jump, that we get stopped. Without the charge jump, we can't scale this wall. Period. Doesn't matter how much speed you have, what angle you come at it, you're not getting past this wall. Great start. Dinosaur Jungle. The first few sections are simple enough, just tilting to dodge dinos and navigate downstream, until we reach this split in the road. Taking the ramp leads you to this homing attack section. Yeah, self-explanatory.
Use your homing attack on the balls that don't have spikes.
While going the other way is a nice jog until this evil flower. You might think that we're screwed, but you'd be forgetting that this isn't Sonic 06. We can actually just jump into this guy to damage him. But then we reach a familiar problem of this ledge that's just barely too high to scale. This one hurts. Fail. Evil Foundry. This is where things start to get a bit more interesting. After this lovely brisk jog down a wall, we make a few jumps and ignore this big guy, play a little bit of Wind Waker, then it's mostly just a matter of dodging these doors and fans, jumping over a few little spike ships and enemies, and hitching a ride on some rails to keep the speed up. There's even some platforming jumps we can clear. It isn't until after Sonic gets charbroiled by these flame genies do we encounter a problem. Sonic can't jump over this moving pillar. The first time I recorded this, which actually didn't record properly, I thought it was the end of the run and I just quit. But this time around I discovered a strat that actually could be pretty useful for speedruns in the parts where they wait for the crushing pillars, where you can just jump around the pillar. I didn't stick the landing the first time, but having discovered this on a whim, you bet I was going to try again. This is where these fire genies really become a problem though. You're supposed to use a charge jump then homing attack to go above their flame, but we can't do that. You can wait for the genies to stop shooting fire, but they don't stop for long enough to get past without getting hit. And because I lost all my rings from dying, I can't just take the 2 hits and move on. Luckily, with some well-timed invincibility frames, I can just barely jog past. Now that we're back, I stick the landing, and see that we can't charge jump and air dash over this pit. RIP. Levitated Ruin. The wind's a bit of a problem here. Normally you have homing attacks and jump canceling to fight against it, but we can't do that here, so we have to be a bit more patient. Jump sparingly and use the rails when appropriate, and try not to get hit.
The way he leaps off of rooftops and flips backwards to face the camera before falling into a headfirst dive is just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen. It gives me goosebumps every time he does it, especially as the music begins to swell.
We have a little more combat, but much like the flower, it's a non-issue. Then we run on some trademark Kishimoto paths that depressingly look better here than the Wyvern boss fight. Things really start to get a bit crazy. I mean, look at this. What the hell is happening? Eventually we reach this vine swinging section, and at first I thought we were screwed, since the game typically tells you to homing attack onto them. But then I learned that it doesn't even matter. You just get magnetized to the next vine. Cool. More paths and more wind lead us to the final tower, where normally you can take a shortcut by jumping on this vine and homing onto the spring, but we can't do that, so you have to climb. Not a problem though. After collecting these rings we probably weren't supposed to, we actually complete the level. Nice.
Just made it. No.
Pirate Storm. The game does the first jump for us,
Exaggerated swagger.
but we have to do the second one. In that lost first recording I mentioned earlier, I thought this was the end of the run, so I just quit the stage here. But this time around I figured out that if you time it just right, you can make it across. Getting through the rest of the stage also requires some carefully timed jumps, and it was actually pretty fun to do. Unfortunately, we eventually reach PewDiePie's revenge, requiring the homing attack, and thus ending this stage's run. Looks like we got plundered. Yeah, I don't know, let's just move on. Skeleton Dome. The glitter on the ground hints at hidden grind rails that essentially act as dash panels, but the fun is over once you have to awkwardly navigate through these bones you're supposed to homing attack. We also need to do a little bit of combat to get past this barricade, and after this is where having knowledge about this game comes in handy. If you just keep going onwards, you'll eventually reach a platforming section that we couldn't possibly get past with our current moveset. But if you're paying attention to the dialogue, Shara hints at an alternate pathway that I wouldn't be surprised if 90% of the people watching this don't know about. To get up there, you need to ignore the grind rails and go after the enemies to unlock hidden springs. I had a bit of trouble at first, since if you take the first spring, you need to homing attack this genie, but it turns out there are other springs later on that skip that. From there we get treated to a jog around this giant fossil that absolutely begs for speed break, but after that we enter the dungeon. Skeleton Dome is pretty combat based, so this is where we start getting into some difficulty. The name of the game here is precise jumps and careful movement. Treat yourself to some treasure, ignore as many enemies as you can, and make your way to the goal, baby. Skeleton Dome! Night Palace. The sidling section here gave me a lot of trouble. They probably expect you to have some of the speed skills equipped so you can move a bit faster, or you can just use the slide from a charge jump to kind of blast through them, but we have to do it the hard way. Black Knight fans' arguments for the game being good when they go beyond story and music.
This is about to come crumbling down!
You really have to be precise and know your timing. Black Knight fans when they realize the game was the worst in the series.
We just have to face it.
Man, why do I do this to myself? We do a bit more dodging, then have a nice, relaxing carpet ride through the air, marveling at the scope of the palace floating above the earth. And we go through this portal into this pocket dimension where we dodge some spears in spectacular fashion until we reach the biggest anticlimax in this video. You see this hourglass here? You need to hit it to move on. With a homing attack. The regular jump won't cut it. The end. So, when you play Secret Rings with no skills, meaning no homing attack, no charge jump, no soul gauge, no jump cancel, nothing, you can only beat 2 out of 7 main stages in the game, Levitated Ruin and Skeleton Dome. It makes sense, since these two are more about spectacle, dodging obstacles, and combat, as opposed to platforming and gimmicks. Either way, it's interesting that Secret Rings allows you to disable these moves outright, and it's a testament to just how much the game was experimenting with the movement of Sonic. Well, what's the benefit of you knowing all this? Well, not anything really. But it doesn't matter. Not every second of your life must be spent on education and personal enrichment. Obviously you should address deficiencies in these areas, but sometimes a mind just needs to rest to absorb new information and quell boredom. When the Romans watched gladiators battle to the death in colosseums, or even when you go watch a Shakespeare play, would you really consider those experiences explicitly educational? Are you a better person for having watched them? Well, if you wanted to get pretentious about it, you could say yes, and that they represent and communicate the deepest natures of humanity. But what makes the video you experienced any different? There is a fundamental human strive to achieve, to create things to achieve from. When you play a draw-free game of solitaire, there's nothing stopping you from switching halfway through to play draw 1. But you don't do that unless you're a wuss, because even if you fail, you want the achievement of having attempted such a thing. These challenge videos, they represent forms of this need to achieve. Even if not explicitly educational, they still have meaning. And by watching this video, you've gone on this journey with me. Parasocially, sure, but you experienced something. So mark your experience by smashing that motherfucking like button, and if you want to achieve more with me, go ahead and hit subscribe. Like 7 Rings in Hand says,
If all as is, then it's never as it is. Back to back, make real of all that seems. Make real of all that seems.
I have no idea what that means.